Okay, so let's go fast on this here. Now, the letter D in the C major scale would be the number 2, or the word re would be number 2. The letter E in the C major scale would be a number 3. The word me would be number 3, and so on. You got that? Does that make sense? So all we're doing is simply assigning numbers to the notes associated with a major scale. And again, we have 7 notes in a major scale, and the last note repeats, so therefore we have a number 8 in the mix. All right, so those numbers will be what we use as placeholders. That's kind of what I meant by the algebra thing. So the number 1 could be a C, or it could be a D or an F or a G. It just depends on which kind of major scale you want to create. But again, the 1 will simply be a placeholder for us. All right, so I'm hoping that makes sense. All right, so we have now the ingredients. We know the proper measuring tools. All we need is the recipe or the formula for the major scale. And here it is. Listen very carefully. I'm going to give you the ingredients and the measurements for these ingredients. Here we go. The major scale consists of 1, whole step, 2, whole step, 3, half step, 4, whole step, 5, whole step, 6, whole step, 7, half step, 8. That's the formula. Now remember, the number 1 and 8 notes are the same. So 1 and 8, they are the same. They're just 8 spaces away or an octave apart. Now let me just review what I said to you. Between the numbers, I mentioned either a whole step or half step. That is the measurement that will tell you what will happen after playing any given number. So again, if you think about the number 1 representing a C, when I play the C, I then said whole step. That means from the letter C, I need to go up a whole step. So I'll skip over a tone, and then I'll land on the very next. And that will give us our next number, which is number 2. Okay? So in between those numbers, again, we have the measurements. All right, so let me repeat it. Think about what I'm saying again. So we have 1 whole step, 2 whole step, 3 half step, 4 whole step, 5 whole step, 6 whole step, 7 half step, 8. Now, for some of you, that still may be a little tricky to remember. Here's how I think about remembering this major scale formula or recipe. Just say to yourself that there are whole steps between all of the notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, with the exception of 2 places, between 3 and 4, 7 and 8. Everything else, assume that you are playing a whole step. Okay? So again, the major formula is 1 whole step, 2 whole step, 3 half step, 4 whole step, 5 whole step, 6 whole step, 7 half step, 8. Again, a very simple shortcut is to say to yourself, there are 2 half steps in the major scale, and they occur between 3 and 4, 7 and 8. Boom, you are done. Now, the magic of this formula is if you were to pick out any random note on your instrument and called it number 1, that note that you played randomly on your instrument is a number 1, and applied the recipe that I just mentioned or the formula, you will be able to successfully play a major scale starting on that random note that you picked out. Now remember, that random note, whatever its name is, that will become the name of the overall major scale you're playing. All right, so if you randomly, picked out an E, and you started to apply the major scale formula starting at E, E being number 1, and use the major scale formula, E whole step, and then go up to the next note, you will successfully play an E major scale. Even though you may not know all of the notes between E, number 1, and E, number 8, you can actually play that scale successfully. All right, so I think we've covered a lot of ground today. Let's go ahead and rock today's tips. And today's tips, they are brought to you by, you haven't heard this in a minute, Jingle Money. This book shows you how to actually earn income by writing music for commercials. You got it, jingles. You can actually earn thousands of dollars for just seconds of music. And if you actually spend the time to observe this, jingles are everywhere. They're used for insurance commercials, like Nationwide is on your side. They're used for stuff like Pepto-Bismol. They're everywhere. The I'm loving it melody, that's all in the jingle world. People are getting paid to make music for commercials. It's still a thing, believe it or not. Find out how you can get in on this action by picking up the book, Jingle Money. Now, one disclaimer for you guys. The book will be out next month through Hal Leonard, but you can pre-order it if you hop on to Amazon. So check that book out. Oh, and you can actually go to the website jinglemoney.com and learn a bit more and read a few sample pages from the book. So yeah, check that out. All right, so let's get back to our tips, and our tips will go over what we've learned today. All right, so here we go. We use 12 tones or 12 notes in Western music. We use a 12-tone system. Next, the shortest measurement or distance between one note and another is called a half step. The very next note, that neighboring note, that distance, it's called a half step. Now, when we skip over one of those neighboring notes or move up or down 2 half steps, that is also known as a whole step. That's a measurement, or that's the distance away that you're traveling, if you will. A whole step. All right, next thing. Numbers can take the place of letter names when we're talking about major scales. More specifically, we're using numbers 1 through 8. Now remember, number 1 and 8, they are the same thing. So if I start on a C, I will end on a C. So again, number 1 and 8, just memorize that. They are the same. And remember, the distance between 1 and 8 is an octave. The root part of that word, oct, stands for 8. An octave. All right, finally, the major scale formula is as follows. 1 whole step, 2 whole step, 3 half step, 4 whole step, 5 whole step, 6 whole step, 7 half step, 8. Yo, I hope that this session has been informative for you guys who are learning your major scales and just kind of diving into music theory. Yo, let's keep it going for next week. Let's tackle some other areas of music theory, but I'm hoping that these examples and these explanations are helping you to get your mind around music theory and showing you how it's really not that complicated. You just got to learn the formula and you can do just about anything in music. And when you do, you'll be more successful in that music life. And make sure you subscribe to the podcast. And hey, you can do one better by sharing it too. Be good. We'll check you out next week.
This just gets old. I know there's gotta be a better way for me in this life. That is my